So this is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for November 15th, 2021. And I'm going to read through our electronic meeting procedures before we get started. All commissioners will be on video. Commissioners and staff will be asked to click raise hands when they wish to speak. The chair will call on individuals to speak. Commissioners and staff are asked to keep their microphones muted until called upon. Members of the public will be muted during presentations and commissioner discussion. For public participation, the public may join the meeting from a computer or dial in by phone. All public members are muted upon entry. To make a comment during public comment segments, if you're on a computer, click the raise hand icon. It is either in the participants panel on the right side of your screen or in the control panel at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You may have to hover over that area to see it. By phone, hit *9 to raise your hand. The chair will call on those with raised hands individually. You will be unmuted when called upon. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. All right, and we will do our roll call.
Dunlap.
Present.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Berg.
Here.
Commissioner Clemmie.
Here.
Chair Haley.
Here. Thank you. And our approval for our agenda tonight, if there's anyone that has any alterations, otherwise we can move to approve it.
I'll move to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second that.
And all those in favor?
Yes.
Aye. And then our approval of the minutes from last month, October 18th.
As we were just discussing, they're very detailed and they seem to really reflect a long, important meeting. So I imagine we might be referring back to these minutes. And they look accurate. I would move to approve them.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and any public comments on items that are not on our agenda tonight? And Leah Angstman is with us. Did you want to say something, Leah?
No, I don't need to say anything. Just wanted to say that I am here, and if you have any questions for the Historical Commission or for me, just let me know.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here. All right. That was the only hand raised. So we'll have our first public hearing for landmark grant and alteration certificate for 841 Jefferson Avenue, and we'll have our staff presentation.
Right, thank you, Chair Haley. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, everyone can see that okay, I'm hoping? Excellent. So tonight we have before you a request for landmarking, an alteration certificate, and then a grant request. So we'll be reviewing all three this evening for this property, which is at 841 Jefferson Avenue. And so, oops. So here you can see on the screen before you on the left-hand side would just be a general aerial location for the property. So you can see it there at the corner of Walnut Street and Jefferson Avenue. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see the general location where 841 is located there, indicated by the star. So, and that's generally located within Old Town. Here we have a couple photos of historic conditions. So this is important to note. So just to pause on a moment for this slide. On the left-hand side of the slide, you'll see a photo from the Boulder County Assessor's Card in 1950. And then the property did undergo a pretty big remodel and kind of addition process in 1959. So you can see that on the right-hand side of your screen. So that photo would indicate, you can see the addition kind of closing that porch area, adding what we would call kind of that cat slide or that sloped roof on the side, and then a couple changes to the windows, siding, adding brick, a couple of the sort of things that you still do see today. So I can bring this back, but just an important kind of note to look at for historic integrity, which I'll get more into in a second. To give you a couple more photos, these two photos would be from 2020. And so on the left-hand side, you can see it on the east elevation, and then the right-hand side, that kind of northeast view of what it looked like in 2020. And then earlier this year did undergo some further changes. And so these are current photos. And so 2021 photos showing most specifically, or the biggest change of the siding, which we'll get into as we kind of talk about a little bit more. So I just wanted to give you kind of all three views so you can kind of understand some of the changes that went on here at the property. And so the first thing we'll go into would be the landmarking. So we'll take a look at the request to landmark 841 Jefferson Avenue. And as always, here are some of the criteria we look at, or the criteria we look at for landmarking. So if it's over 50, some of the architectural, social, and geographic significance, as well as its physical integrity. So for the criteria, if it's 50 years old, the principal structure it was built circa 1904 originally. And then as I mentioned in those other slides, there were additions and renovations to this original structure in 1959. So the property is itself well over 50 years old. And then even those that kind of major point of remodel or addition did happen over 50 years ago as well. So just something to keep in mind in terms of historic integrity of both the original structure and the additions. And the additions. For the architectural significance, Steph does find that the property does have both the style and integrity of the structure that meets the criteria for architectural significance. And so you can see that the subject property exemplifies specific elements of an architectural style or period, represents a built environment of a group of people in an era that is culturally significant to Louisville, and then showcases a significant and historic remodel. So you can see some of those reasons we do believe it meets the criteria for architecture. For social significance, Steph does also believe the subject property exemplifies the cultural, political, economic, or social heritage of the community, as it exemplifies, again, the cultural, political, and economic social heritage through two families, mostly the Carlton family and the Masoni families that both lived there for a period of time, and particularly Mr. Masoni, who served as the fire chief and the town council over a period of time as well. For the physical integrity, Steph also believes it meets the criteria for physical integrity required for landmarking. And a couple of things to note, as I've already mentioned a little bit, but as it relates to the physical criteria, the 1959 era remodel would have spoken directly to the stylistic proclivities popular in that post-World War II period. Pardon me. Many homes built or remodeled in the suburbs across America at this time would have had similarly styled homes. That sort of minimal traditional ranch sort of style is certainly showcased here in this particular remodel. The structure certainly adds character and value to Old Town, and the property was originally developed as part of Jefferson Place. It's been replatted over the years. It's its own Masoni Place subdivision, but it was originally a part of the Jefferson subdivision, and certainly its physical context and location still remains there. Relative to the property's qualities between 1959 and 1962, it retains its integrity of location, setting, design, materials, workmanship, and association. And although there was an addition built after 1962, it's not prominent from either Jefferson or Walnut, so integrity of design is not compromised or completely lost, even with some of those additions as well. So for the landmarking portion, staff does recommend that the structure be landmarked and would recommend that the house be named for the Masoni family. So as we move on, we'll kind of go, just as a reminder, we'll look at all these individually and then put them all together at the end. So that would be landmarking, and then moving on to the alteration certificate. We have a request to approve an alteration certificate for 841 Jefferson Avenue. And so the applicant is applying for an alteration certificate to approve rehabilitation work that has already occurred related to siding, door, and window replacement. So to pause on this as well, that right-hand side of your screen, I know it's a lot of words on the screen there, but just so we had it in front of us in case we wanted to reference it, that is pulled directly from Resolution 2019, 2017 Series 2019. Other way around, sorry, getting the numbers wrong, but the resolution that would dictate kind of our grant requirements, our grant allowances, and those sorts of items. And so what you see there is section 12H, and that outlines that applicants are allowed to apply for grants, essentially at this point, credits for work that has already been done. So in this case, that's what we're looking at. The work has been done. There are certain constraints on that. So it cannot be more than 5 years from the effective landmarking date, as you see there in that first bullet point. So in this case, anything we're reviewing or any receipts that we have, which were a part of the packet and our requirement in this case to apply for the grant credit, can be done no more than 5 years ago, basically from today. And so it's within the 5-year span. It would still need to meet eligibility requirements, just as any grants that we look at. And then again, it would be within the 5 years, and we already need the receipts for proof of payment, just like we would if we were to kind of give that reimbursement matching grant component. So we do have the receipts. Everything was within the 5 years, and then we looked at what was eligible within kind of the receipts that we have and the work that was done, the siding being one of them, for instance. And so I can come back to that, but just to kind of go through our kind of typical, we would review it just the same. So for the alteration certificate request, here are just some examples of the criteria and standards that we would look at. This before you right here on the slide certainly isn't exhaustive, but it's pulled out a couple of the lists that were in the staff report as part of the packet. So for instance, we would look at number 5 of the criteria, where the effects of the proposed work in creating, changing, destroying, or otherwise impacting. You can see there that the doors and windows match what would be historic locations. The siding on the property has been altered a number of times, most recently in 1988, so changes to that would not be affecting original or historic siding. So you can see it meets that criteria. And there's another example that's here outlined before you on the screen. Number 8, distinctive features, finishes, and construction techniques are examples of craftsmanship that characterize a property shall be preserved. So you can see in this case as well, the altered elements proposed as part of the request are the doors, windows, and the siding. And for all 3, they weren't original, even to the 1959 remodel. And in addition, the historic structure assessment that we have on file for the property noted that replacing the siding would be needed, and was one of the things that were needed in general for the property. So again, the full list we can talk about, it's in the staff report, but just to pull out a couple examples of what we look at for an alteration certificate. So staff does find that the changes made do not result in any loss of historic character, and would recommend approval of the resolution 10, which would be for the alteration certificate. And then moving forward, lastly, to the grant request. This is a request to approve a grant request at 841 Jefferson. Again, I already listed it out a little bit in the kind of talking about the alteration certificate. So this would be essentially a grant credit. It would still be matching. It would look the same. We're just looking at work that's already been done is kind of the big difference. And so in this case, total eligible projects with the receipts that we have and the work that's been done was 34,000 total. So the matching credit, the matching grant would be 17,000 as the request this evening. And so just as we look at for other things, this slide just kind of shows you some of the things that are eligible for grant funds, or in this case, the grant credits. You can see windows are on there, siding, and then doors would be on there as well. And so in this case, here's just kind of a table that delineates a little bit more specifically what we looked at. Certainly those receipts again are included as part of the packet and would be a requirement in this case. So you can see that the total is 34,000 for a matching of 17. And so altogether, the staff does recommend approval of the landmark, resolution 9, the alteration certificate, resolution 10, and the grant, resolution 11. And with that, I am here for any questions on this item.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Does anyone have questions for staff?
Go ahead.
No, go.
Maybe a clarification. I think that, well, this grant is all for prior work, but it was done pretty recently, and I guess it was done under a subcommittee approval, so that, well, there was actually some problem with the work starting before the building permit, as I recall, but basically it was done under a building permit. And then now is the alteration certificate to basically do that work and get a grant to retroactively pay for it. Is there anything we would have wanted to do differently in that process?
That's a good question. Yeah, so just to kind of since I think you were a part of that subcommittee review, so just to back up and kind of give a little more context, but that's a good question. So that's right. Kind of the timeline of what we're looking at would be the property did have, right, its probable cause hearing. It had an HSA. Earlier this summer, it did, the owner, they did get new siding. So as a property that was not yet landmarked, it would have just been kind of our subcommittee review. Wouldn't have had, as it wasn't landmarked yet, it didn't require to get an alteration certificate. It was more at that stage, just the demolition, because, right, the siding you can see from the street or from those kind of, facade facing elevations. And so we did the subcommittee review, and then it was released at subcommittee, which, for this, and that's when we would have looked at it. That's at that stage, right, as we do with demolition subcommittees, we say, would this hurt the historic integrity? Would this have kind of a negative impact on its future ability to be landmarked? And so that's a little bit of a roundabout, but I think you can see that's kind of the time in which we would have looked at that. So we did get that chance. We had the subcommittee review. It wouldn't have needed an alteration subcommittee or an alteration review at that time since it wasn't landmarked. In this case, since we're looking at the landmark of it, right, it's requested for the landmark work, and work is being, looked at, an alteration certificate would just be part of this process as well. Since do we feel at this stage as well that as a landmark that was okay, and would it be able to receive the grant fund? So it's just kind of lumped all together since we're looking at all three things tonight. So does that kind of make sense? I can explain that a little more.
Yeah, I guess I can't see how it could have been done much differently if the intent was to do the siding earlier. I guess you do need the alteration certificate now.
Right,
Yeah.
Exactly.
Hey, I just
Even
wanted to
though-
jump in. This is Matt Goldstein. Sorry I was late. I had trouble getting in on the Zoom, but I'm on the call via phone. So I'm here if there's any questions or I need to talk.
Okay, we'll have time for the applicant to talk in just a minute. So thank you for letting
Sure.
us know.
Okay, so I'm fine.
And did you say there was an HSA on this?
That's correct.
that?
Yep.
Okay.
So I sorry, off the top of my head, I forget the date of the probable cause hearing, but there is a completed and accepted HSA on file. Yep.
Okay. Okay. So basically they probable cause, got the HSA, and went ahead and did work before landmarking is what happened.
Exactly. Yep. And then under that section 12, it does give them that allowance to say, I would like to apply for the credit matching funds. Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
So
You have
I have a question about the siding then, because I'm a little confused about the reference back to multiple siding in 1988. And since I wasn't on that demo subcommittee, so did it come through like, this is going subcommittee, it's in the Old Town overlay. So you got to look at this because that's what we do for any property in the Old Town overlay. And then the subcommittee was happy with their choices of siding to bring it back to the 1959 version.
Yeah, I think so. They did release it. They felt it was, appropriate replacement. Certainly it's replacement siding. It's kind of that fiberglass hardy board. And in this case, it wouldn't necessarily, again, at the subcommittee, it not being landmarked, and really here you could decide as well, but because there's been historic wood siding, but then also kind of mid-century, probably steel siding, I believe it probably would have been in that 59 redo, you could kind of have it look either way, right? Because at that point, either is historic since the existing siding was from 1988, I believe it was, or, was replaced over time, if that makes sense. So you're right. So at that subcommittee review, which we did exactly as you point out, right? We say it's an Old Town, it's 1955 or older, so we do need to look at it at the subcommittee level, even though it's not landmarked at that time. And that's right. As we do in those subcommittees, we say, would this be appropriate? Would this take away from its ability to be landmarked? Those sorts of questions that we look at siding, and so, or at that time. And so that's what we looked at for this siding proposal at the time. Yep.
Okay, so the subcommittee decided that, I guess I'm curious. So the subcommittee decided that the siding that was picked looked historic enough, but not maybe specific to 1959.
Right. And it wouldn't have to be, for instance, like I'm
right. But now But now we're looking at landmarking a property that's supposed to look like something from 1959. Is that, I mean, that's how I look at it. I'm like, okay, so this property is supposed to look like something from 1959 and we don't, I mean, I guess I can't really tell from that 1959 photo.
Yeah, that's a good
You know what I
question.
mean? It looks thinner. It doesn't look, I don't know. It just doesn't look, it doesn't look the same to me. So, I mean, I could see a subcommittee saying, yeah, that's fine because it's not landmarked. But to landmark this now, I'm a little,
Yeah, so that's
I'm
definitely
struggling
something
with that.
you can all talk about as commissioners. I think the other thing that I'll note too is, you don't necessarily, the way kind of our code reads and the way we structure kind of our criteria for landmarking, it's not necessarily right to a specific time. It would just say, does it meet these criteria? Does it meet these sort of standards? Does it still have, historic integrity in terms of its massing or its styling or that sort of thing? So you're certainly, you could certainly talk about it and if you feel appropriate, that's why we have the alteration certificate on this evening. But the other thing I'll note is part of why I was just mentioning those 1959 additions would be less that, you're landmarking to a certain time, but more that the additions themselves don't necessarily take away from its historic integrity because the additions are now historic. So just kind of that delineation. It's not like you're saying, yes, everything looks to X date. It's more that doesn't meet our criteria overall. And so I just wanted to note that, yes, there have been additions and sometimes additions take away from historic integrity, or in this case, they're kind of emblematic of the time and have their own integrity because they're old enough to kind of reach that 50-year mark. Does that make sense, kind of the way I explained that?
Yeah, and we can look at it. I'm still a little.
And I guess too, for just to kind of get clarification also, is looking at the citing. This is more of the, I don't know what you call that kind of citing, but it's not just like linear citing. It's more of like the, what do you call that?
Almost like a shingle.
Like a shingle kind of shaker something. So I guess that that is something like it is very different from anything in our downtown area as far as the timeline. So I think that might be kind of what you're saying, Andrea, is it's very different from anything historic as far as the record. As far as
and maybe we can just bring this back when we do a staff discussion, because it's not a specific, I think my question was answered. So we can circle back during the discussion later.
Yep.
Andrea, I was part of that subcommittee, and the citing that was proposed there looked, well, it obviously is not the same as the historic citing. It looks more like it. And in my mind, it was an improvement over the 1988 steel citing. So we have probably at least 4 different versions that we're sort of comparing here. There have been sort of a side discussion related to the zoning thing about whether or not we should have maybe some guidelines for materials in the residential area that might be a guide, because if we don't offer a guide, it's hard for a homeowner probably to decide. There are some guidelines for the commercial or business part of Old Town to use. I don't know if they've been reviewed a long time, but they do exist. Maybe something like that would help us decide what are most appropriate changes in the future.
So I think we'll ask some more questions, maybe of you, Gary, too, as far as that discussion for the subcommittee when we come back to our commission discussion. So, so that's good that you have some insight into that. Does anyone have any other questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right. And so now, if the applicant would like to just state your name and address for us, just for the record, and then you have the floor.
Oh, great. Can you guys hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. It's Matthew Goldstein, 841 Jefferson Avenue. And And I've lived in that house since 2013. I actually rented it from Mark Missoni. And I always told him, he said he was never going to sell the house because it's been in the family for 65 years. But I said, if you ever sell it, let me know. And luckily one day, over 5 years ago, I think it was actually 6 years ago, it was fall of 2015. He said he was going to sell that house and then the house behind it. So, I did everything I could to get the funding to buy that house. And that house was built, I believe, in 1895, and one family owned it, I think, for approximately 65 years, and then the Missonis bought it. And the Missonis, I believe, are, I don't know this for a fact, but Mark told me his grandfather owned most of, downtown Main Street at one point. And I love that house. I love Louisville, but it was in rough shape. The siding was aluminum. It was discolored. All the windows were very energy inefficient. And slowly but surely, over 5 years, I have, completely redone the house. So the entire inside is new. I know that really doesn't concern what I'm asking for. And then I started the process of getting historic. Keith, my neighbor, was in the process of getting his house historic. And, I've known about it, and I thought, wow, what a great deal, because I am never tearing down this house. Like, I put up $100,000 on the inside into it. And I love Louisville, and the house is very sentimental to me, and I plan on never selling it and kind of living there for either the rest of my life, or if I have to move, renting it out. And so, I think that corner is a very important corner in Old Town Louisville. It's only 3 lots on that entire city block. It's, a couple blocks off Main Street. The park's there. We have people walking by all the time. Perfect world, I probably would have waited, to get the official landmarking, but, in talking with the city, explaining to me how it worked. And honestly, in the world we live in today, with supply chain issues and contractors not getting, materials, my contractor said, I kind of have this window. I don't know how much longer it's going to take, and I didn't want to wait till the next summer. Obviously, didn't want to do it during winter with the with painting and things like that. So, my whole goal is to get that house to look, very traditional, very classic. And that's why I picked the shake siding on the front, which is actually about 3 times as more expensive, because that's a classic. I think it's timeless. I mean, you can see shake siding from Victorians in the mid 1800s all the way up to today. So, I just wanted to have a very classic, clean look and really make the house kind of a very pleasant thing to look at. And I'll just say, being very centered with people walking around all the time, especially on the weekends, the feedback has been amazing. I literally get stopped almost every time I'm outside my yard, people just telling me how much they appreciate the work that we've done on the house, from the landscaping to the fence, to the lighting, the new driveway, and of course the siding, and the new paint colors, which, really kind of, brightened it up and I think made it look even more kind of classic. So yeah, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. It definitely did well. And, my whole intent is to, make this house at least one of the houses that'll never get torn down in Louisville, and will always have, that really classic old town, historic look to it. And, in my opinion, I think we accomplished that. And the feedback I've gotten from neighbors has been, very reaffirming on that. So, my intent 100% was just to make this house kind of bulletproof, with getting really high quality hardy board, because that's the strongest material you can get, and keeping the colors very classic and simple. And, just excited about having it historic. And I actually want to name it on the plaque, if I am granted that, Missoni Place, because I really want to pay homage to the Missoni family for, being one of the pioneers in Louisville from, I guess the 50s and on.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your passion for the house and just for all you've done. So yeah, and thank you for being here tonight. Does anyone have any questions for the
Great.
applicant? All right. And then we'll see if there's anyone in the public that would like to comment. I don't see anyone. So we'll bring it back for discussion for the commission.
Linda, we did receive a letter, an email from a member of the public.
Thank you.
That's then entered into the record.
Yep. Thank you for remembering that. I was thinking about that earlier in the meeting and I completely forgot. So thank you.
So I have a question. If this property had been landmarked before the work had been done, so with the more kind of classic 1950s look with the aluminum siding and the unpainted brick, I don't know if we can answer this question, but would the shake siding, anytime a property's landmarked, then it has to go at least in front of a subcommittee, correct, to do any sort of exterior alteration. So would that shake siding have been approved likely? Because it was landmarked, it probably would have been landmarked for that 50s look.
Well, and I think too, like all the pictures we have are all the, like there's no record of shake shingles on that structure historically either.
Mm-hmm.
So I think whether it was something towards the 1959 or if they went even back to the previous, like I think it'd be one of those two would be my opinion, those two linear options of siding versus a shake shingle. Does anyone else have different thoughts on that?
Well, if it had been landmarked in that order, then I guess it would have been the 1988 aluminum siding that would have been in place at the time before there was request to change that, and that does become difficult.
Maybe the 80 would not be 50 years or older though, right?
Well, it would have been just a layer on the entire building, so it's hard to tell if we would have approved that. We probably would have, might well have.
Right, and of course that's a theoretical question. So we don't.
Yeah.
That's not how it happened.
Yeah.
And I think this is a really interesting house because for lots of reasons, it has so much cultural history. It's in the Old Town overlay. It's a heavily, populated area. Even the owner referenced, people who live there, but people don't live there, walking by quite a bit. And it has two time periods for which it can be considered. But I think because of the extent of the work was so extensive. In the 1950s, that it really sort of, in my mind, kind of became a 1950s house. Like there wasn't visually, when we look at our different criteria, it still had the cultural and social history, but it doesn't have that, it has, now that's the era, that's the most recent historic era that it looked like, that has all those elements of. So for me, I'm kind of Andrew, I'm like, the question is, for landmarking, in my mind, we're for landmarking that 1950s house. More so than, but again, of course, that cultural and social history and some of the other criteria. So I'd love to hear what other people think about this one because it's really, I think it looks great. I love how it looks, and I love that we're keeping that house. The owner intends to keep that house as is in Louisville because it's a really unique house, and that's something that people in Louisville really value is that diversity in terms of homes. So that's great to hear that. Such high quality work has been done to it that will keep it there for a long time, and that's the intent. I'd love to hear what other people think about the time period and the landmarking.
Chrissy, I think you make a good point that it was an early 20th century house that became a 1950s house. And people with a bit of imagination walking by can tell that.
Mhm.
And it does meet some criteria. It just makes it a little more confusing.
Mm.
Or complex, I guess is a better word.
I think one things I struggle with, I mean, I think, because there's three things we're looking at. And I think as far as and we approve probable cause. So obviously we've already said like this meets criteria as far as the structure and structural integrity, architectural integrity, age, all that. We've already kind of talked about that. And I think what's hard now is it's different than what we first talked about. Because I think for me, yeah, the 1959 structure, style, all that is still very much there. So I think it could still be landmarked. Because I don't think overall the architectural integrity is gone. I think the general structure from 1959, all that, the siding is the main thing that's now different. And I guess as far as, yeah, so I think that's what I'm really struggling with. Because if it had been the vertical, like a horizontal siding, more traditional, and what was in this historic photos that we see, the 1959 could have very easily been covering up the old siding. Like that's a historical possibility where they could have taken it off and it could have been a 1950s house with this old siding still on it. Does that make sense? Like that's a possibility that this house could still have the horizontal wood siding. I don't know. So that's, I think the shake shingle is just confusing because it's just kind of that false sense of history of just like, where did this come from? And so I don't know, it's tricky. Like, I don't know if I don't think I cleared anything up. I think it's just kind of that confusing, because it's a great house. The improvements are great. Like, the owner intentions are great. Like, although, there's so much good things that I don't want to put a barrier, but it's just tricky.
Yeah. So that, I guess for me, maybe begs a question of how many elements are necessary of the historical integrity for us to decide for or against landmarking. I mean, it's the kind of in the presentation and the packet we looked at before tonight, it referenced the windows are in the same spot, the doors are in the same spot, that roof line is very obviously,
Right.
speaks for itself for being the 1950s and that style. So it meets a lot of the criteria. I think it just siding is very, because the siding was redone, I think so well. I mean, it looks great, but it doesn't quite match the rest of those things. But how many, does it all have to meet the historical criteria, or if most of it does, then is that enough?
And I think to some extent that's the subjectivity of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the lines of the house and the general structure of the house are and the placement of the windows, like the window and door openings, are definitely more important than siding. Siding can always be changed. It could at any point go back to the horizontal, more original style. So that's something to consider too, is it could be reversed if for some reason someone in the future ever wanted to take it back to more original siding. That's a lot easier to do than a roof line or a porch enclosure or moving a door or something like that. So that's one perspective.
So
That
I guess,
site, oh, go ahead,
So-
sorry.
I guess I'm just thinking like, okay, so we've done this before where, you know, we get in this situation where we're presented all three things all at once, right? But ultimately we make our decision on landmarking, bleh. Then we make our decision on the alteration, bleh. Then we make our decision on the grant, right? Like it's thrown at us all at once, but ultimately we make the individual decision.
Right, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So like, if this had come to us before any work had been done, would we landmark it? And I think I feel like, yeah, I would have landmarked it. 1959, it did meet social significance. It meant age, it meant architectural and physical integrity, right? So I'd be like, okay, yeah, check, landmark it. But when the alteration certificate would have shown up in the same meeting or a meeting, you know, a month later, I would have balked at the citing. I would have requested that the owner reconsider that and maybe do it more like, right? And because we've had that before. We've had people where we're like, okay, so would you move, you know, can you make that window longer instead of wider or whatever? You know, we've kind of done that. So now that, you know, it's like, well, I mean, I think I don't know, I guess when I'm talking it through, I don't know. So it's just so awkward because so if we had landmarked it, yeah, if we'd landmarked it that way and then the alteration certificate came through and it had gone to so let's say, yeah, like it had been landmarked and then 2 years later they come through and say, hey, we're going to redo the siding. That would have gone to subcommittee and then subcommittee could have said, yeah, that looks historical or it doesn't, and either kicked it to the full commission or let it go. But it wasn't landmarked at the time, so the rules weren't the same. You know what I mean? Like the subcommittee rules weren't the same because it wasn't landmarked when they did that citing.
And I have a question about the subcommittee too, because generally in subcommittees, it's not landmarked. We still, I don't know. I'm just curious if the shake shingles were, what was shown, like was that the siding that was presented? Because I would imagine even in subcommittee level, even if it wasn't landmarked, they would still be like in kind. Like usually it's like, well, they have horizontal siding and they're proposing horizontal siding, that's the same, so that's fine. Oh, but if it was like, oh, it's horizontal, but now they're asking for a shake shingle, it seems like the subcommittee would said, oh, that's actually not the same. So I'm curious in the subcommittee if this was the siding that was proposed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like I said, I was on the subcommittee, I think, thinking back to it. And I believe they provide some samples. There might have been even a couple of different kinds of hardy board for different parts of the construction work. But that's the important part, that siding, it didn't match the prior sidings, including the metal one that was on at the time or anything in the past. But there is a precedent of a shingled horizontal siding in Louisville, old Louisville, of course, often used on those porches, like the structures on Pine, you know, block away from there. So it seems consistent with the kind of palette of materials that might have been used. But I think a lot of the intent was to get a material that was sturdy, that you know, isn't going to need to be replaced,
Right.
like wood clapboard would have been if that was proposed.
And so the style of the shake shingle was what was proposed, though.
Well, I think it was, yeah.
Okay.
It seemed like there were two. Maybe the other was for the fascia or something like that.
Okay. So that's another thing, is I feel like if we if as a subcommittee, we approved I kind of feel like if we approved it, then we probably should just say that's okay, because we are the ones who said okay when we had a chance to say no.
Yeah, then
Isn't
again,
that kind of true? Like, because that's
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Yeah, that's
so
a fair point.
I think that's like it
Yeah.
wasn't a true like in kind as far as shape or style of the original. And Gary, to your point about design guidelines, I think that as far as replacement, if you have horizontal siding on the original, you have to keep horizontal siding. Like that's an easy design thing that we could add, as far as, it has to be like in kind, basically. So anyway,
Well, and
I just think,
but that's tricky too, right? Because it had steel horizontal siding from the 80s.
mhm,
So you would have had to go back to the assessor's card from the 50s,
mhm.
kind of be like, well, that's kind of what's there. But, maybe before the 88 steel, maybe there was shaker under that. I mean, like it is, yeah.
and bear in mind,
interesting.
it wasn't landmarked at that point.
Exactly. And that's the issue now that I'm struggling with. Like the subcommittee, yeah, you did your job. You have different rules with what you're looking at when it's just coming through subcommittee and it's not landmarked. You're looking, yeah, let's keep the town looking historic and the like for like thing, but it doesn't go under the same scrutiny as it does when we're trying to landmark and offer grant money and
Right.
So
Well, in the 1950 assessor card, because that's before it went through the 50s transformation,
right,
and that definitely looks more just like linear traditional siding like you see in Louisville more. Obviously, it's an old picture and there could be room for interpretation, but just based on generally what we see in Louisville, we could probably say that was most likely horizontal siding. And so, yeah, so like this is our historic record. And so that I think it's a good discussion for future subcommittee and design kind of stuff of like, if it looks horizontal in the pictures, like you got to stay horizontal siding. But I think, especially since this had gone through the probable cause determination, I just feel like this might have been just a missed opportunity kind of on our side of like, we didn't guide it very. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree.
So,
Yeah,
I mean, it kind of goes both.
I totally agree, right? It's like,
yeah,
it's a tricky thing, the non-landmarking thing. And so, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I'm okay with that. Like I said, I mean, when you go to vote, I would have voted to landmark it then.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it goes both ways. Oh,
well, yeah, I guess, see, yeah, that's because when we landmark, right? Well, the alteration certificate would have come through and we would have landmarked it if they got rid of the steel siding, right? Probably how we would have done that. Well, like I think the landmarking would have been contingent on getting rid of the steel siding.
I don't know that we often do
not
that.
Not necessarily.
Yeah,
I think it's because we've definitely, looking back on some properties that have all kinds of like 90s editions specifically, those kind of things that were like, well, this wouldn't, but I mean, I think the siding in general is, I don't think we made them take it off. I don't think we ever do landmark contingencies necessarily.
Yeah.
And so it would be it is a landmarked site. Like this is and if the owner chooses to take it back to a certain period or whatever, that'd be fine. And there probably you know, stuff under there, whatever. But yeah, I don't think we would have, in my opinion, I don't think we would have not landmarked it simply because of
Yeah.
the siding on this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously on the flip side, like it would have, you know, we would have loved the applicant to have come to us and landmark it and do all this on the, like for this to be on the front side of the project. But it is what it is, and it's a learning opportunity for all of us. So and I think too, like I think the heart of the project was there. Like it's a relatively small project. It's a small city investment as far as what the grant is actually asking for. And like I said, the Hardy Board will be there for a long, long time. But if for some reason someone wanted to take it back to one of those previous pictures, as far as the more horizontal linear siding, it could be done. And the siding isn't as prominent of a feature as the roof line or the window and door openings and all that. So yeah.
Linda, I think we have a question from Andy.
Yeah, Andy, you can just state your name and address for us.
Great. Hi, this is Andy Johnson, 922A Main Street. I think you guys are getting there, but I do want to offer a little bit of history in terms of siding. So in the 1940s, steel and aluminum, even vinyl siding became commercially available and were pretty common substitutions. And that's when we started to see the kind of decorative steel columns that you see on a lot of front porches that would have replaced the wood. So a couple things. Strictly from a historic preservation perspective, if you're gonna hang your hat on the 1959 photo, you're actually probably preserving the metal siding that was installed on that home. And if you are gonna hang your hat on the 1950s version, you would be looking at the clapboard siding that's represented in that photo. Also, if you were to look at the photos from the 80s a little bit more closely, there was an extra layer of brick veneer that was added to the house on the north side. I'm sure some of you probably already noticed it. Overall, I think here's the big picture. The owner may have put the cart before the horse. However, the owner did a fabulous job renovating this home. It does look really good. I do think that historic preservation is exclusive of our personal taste of enjoying what he did. However, I think the technicality is that the subcommittee did provide guidance that may have been misleading in this process, and therefore, I think, puts the owner in a very awkward position and the commission in an awkward position to know what to do moving forward. I think the right thing to do is to approve all three. I think that you have a lot of good building to hang your hat on, to be proud of, and feel like you're doing the right thing. So in the end, there were a lot of missteps, but I think in the end, there's a huge win, and that's celebrating the home as it is. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Do we more discussion as far as, I guess, any of it? And we haven't talked a whole lot about the actual grant, but it's well within the grant amounts, way less, and then it's also matching. So I feel like the siding, for me too, the siding discussion was maybe more too, just to make sure that that's something that would be that we would approve a grant for. So that was some of the grant discussion, I think, also was just as far as just making that grant grant approved. So yeah. So I think this has all been a good discussion. Do we want to go ahead and vote on the landmark and then move to the alteration and then the grant separately? Do you want to just, that way we can kind of talk about them separately if we need to a little bit?
I think so.
Are we ready for the landmark then?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So does somebody have to make a motion?
Right, I'm sorry.
Or-
If someone wants to make a motion for that and we can vote on it.
Clarify.
Sorry.
Okay. So I'll move to landmark the property at 841 Jefferson. I think it'll be good for our community to landmark, to preserve that home and the structure of it. And, as indicated, the siding may change or could change, but the home will be there. So, so I make that motion to landmark the property at 841 Jefferson Ave.
I'll
Yeah, I
second
don't
that.
second that.
All right, and then we'll have a roll call, please.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Clemmy,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right, so the second is the alteration certificate. And so that's for mainly for the siding. And I guess the important part too is, like we've kind of said, like we probably wouldn't have approved this had it been landmarked, but our subcommittee did release it. So it does, in a roundabout way, say that we did approve it. So
Do we even need an alteration certificate? Given that there was a building permit already that was used to put on that siding and paint?
I think we do to get the grant.
right.
Well, that's our tradition, but is it really necessary?
Well, it is for this because we're doing retroactive.
Yeah, but you wouldn't do an alteration certificate for something retroactive, would you?
If
It
we're
is-
paying for something retroactive, we would.
Well, okay.
So if they,
You know, the tradition.
if the homeowner, well, yeah, they, I guess maybe staff can explain a little better.
Yeah, sure. So just to jump in, essentially what you'd be looking for, right? Even when you're looking at the grant or the matching grant, and then in this case tonight, the credit in this particular example, right? We look at, are the requests of the grant kind of eligible? And so in this case, since they're all coming together, we would also just make sure that there's the alteration certificate. Is that work eligible? Would we approve it? Would you like to see that? And then would that go along in conjunction with the grant kind of eligibility? So they're kind of married in that sense.
Does that answer your question at all? Or still seem kind of weird?
It's well enough, but it sort of seems like an alteration certificate is a permit. But if you're saying that that's a prerequisite to a grant, I can buy that.
Yeah, I think to be thorough, it's probably best in this case. Kind of convoluted.
Do we have any further deliberation about the alteration certificate, or do we want to approve the alteration? Someone make a motion, or do you want?
I'll move that we approve the alteration certificate for 841 Jefferson.
Second that.
All right, we'll do another roll call, please.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Clemmy,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right, and then finally is the actual grant. And so that was for the 17,000 with a matching grant of 17,000 for a total of $34,000 spent on the work.
Yeah, I don't have any problem. It falls under the criteria of door replacement, window replacement, and siding for preservation or restoration. So nobody else has a problem. I will move to approve the matching grant. Oh, sorry.
Well, one question. I think I recalled in reading it that, and I didn't see it in the staff presentation, but I thought that it included painting. And it seemed in the past that painting wasn't included in work that was eligible for a grant. Kim, do you recall if that is in there, and what is the provision for covering that?
That's a good question. I'll double check. They gave us enough receipts that would well cover the 34,000.
Yeah, I think it's a very reasonable amount.
Yep, we can make sure. I'll double check on the painting. I believe you're right. So sorry that I mistyped that in the presentation. And then we'll make sure what we fund is all eligible in terms of the siding, the soffit work, that sort of stuff. So thank you for pointing that out. And we'll make sure all that's matching credit is eligible.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was a good question, because definitely painting is generally not part of it. So yeah.
So Andre, you still want
So
to?
are we okay to approve that tonight,
I
even
think-
though we don't have the
Well, I think we can't. I
those
think
numbers
staff
gonna
said there's-
change?
I think staff said there was enough receipts that would go above and beyond that. Is that what you were saying?
That's correct. We have
Yeah,
we have
and if for some
roughly
reason it's not-
45,000 worth, but not all of those kind of line items on the receipts that we have are eligible items, and so that's where we came up with the number before you. So, yep, I just mistyped painting, so that was a
Okay.
good catch on me. And yep, we'll make sure everything that's credited is eligible projects.
Okay, then I move to approve the matching grant credit for the work previously done at 841 Jefferson Avenue, which has now been landmarked.
I second that.
And we'll do another roll call, please.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Clemmy,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. All right. And so I think any of the deliberations that we have are always good for just really fleshing out why we're doing it, and especially because we are responsible for spending our constituents' money. So we just want to make sure that if someone does have a question at any time about why we decided, we just want to make sure that there's good discussion and lots of questioning, and just making sure that we're being good stewards. So I think that's a lot of the discussion is always a good thing. So Andy, did you have something else to say? His hand is up. I don't know if he.
Oh, I don't think you put it down after the last.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm just making
I think
sure.
we're okay.
Okay. All right. So our next item is we have a couple probable cause determinations. So one is for 633 McKinley Avenue, and we'll have a staff presentation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Let me go ahead and share my screen for this presentation. So as you can see before you, we have a probable cause determination for 633 McKinley Avenue before you this evening. And so here on the screen, on the left-hand side is just the general map of Old Town with the star indicating the approximate location of the subject property. And then the map on the right would be its location there at the corner of McKinley and Pine, and then it's outlined there in the dashed yellow line. On the left-hand side would be some of the Boulder County Assessor photo, and then the sort of footprint from the 1977 card. On the left-hand side would have been the photo from the Boulder County Assessor photo from the 1948 card. So you can see kind of the siding, the porch there, and some of the other elements of the house. For the current conditions, this is what it looks like today. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the kind of just the main front elevation. And then on the right-hand side of the screen would be the east and north elevation essentially there. So the side facing along the corner. Again, the landmark criteria we'd be looking at and talking about this evening would be before you there. If it's 50 years old, does it meet some of those items of significance? And then looking at the criteria for physical integrity. So to get into it, for the 50 years old piece of criteria, 633 McKinley was constructed in 1913, so making it approximately 108 years old. So it certainly meets the 50-year-old requirement. Just to note the photo, that's the Smith family photo from the report from Bridget at the museum. And so it's the from ancestry.com. So just a number of the family members there. For the criteria of if it meets architectural, social, or geographic significance, staff does find the style and integrity of the structure has probable cause to meet that architectural significance. The structure does, is sort of a bungalow. It doesn't exhibit necessarily any high styles, but it certainly carries some of those vernacular elements that are very common at the turn of the kind of 1900s. So the feeling isn't of the home is still intact and exhibits the general bungalow style. Although as you saw, there was the closure of the front porch and then addition on the side, which I'll get a little bit more into momentarily. For the social significance, staff finds the structure meets the social and cultural heritage. It has a long history of association with families that typify there were immigrants, minors, and then both were among the families that have lived in the home over time. For physical integrity, the house does appear to retain 5 of the 7 aspects: so location, setting, design, feeling, and association. And there was a non-historic greenhouse on the south side of the property, and then the enclosure of the porch. So we'll actually get it into later in the meeting overall, but there was a subcommittee review for the non-historic greenhouse addition, and it was approved that that be removed. So kind of a partial demolition subcommittee review. So the non-historic element is approved to be removed as part of your review. And then it is in the 633 McKinley is found in its original location. So here's the preservation master plan. You can see how the finding of probable cause would meet the following goals of goal 3 and goal 5. And so staff does recommend that the HPC find that there is probable cause for landmarking for 633 McKinley Avenue under the criteria section in the municipal code. The current maximum amount available for a historic structure assessment is $4,000 for residential properties. And staff recommend that the HPC approve a grant not to exceed that $4,000 for 633 McKinley Avenue. You may by motion approve or deny the finding of probable cause. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Does anyone have questions for staff?
Nope.
All right. Is the applicant here?
Yes, we have Mary Van Zale is here on behalf of 633 McKinley.
Hello.
And if you'll just state your name and address for us for the record, and then you have the floor.
Okay, I'm Mary Van Zale. My address is 633 McKinley Ave in Louisville. And thanks for considering our application. We're beginning to think about how we might make some adjustments to better accommodate our family. And after a really informative meeting with Kim, this was a pretty exciting option for us to learn more about our house.
That's awesome. I think one of the best things about taking that first step with probable cause too is you get the really good social history. So hopefully you got a copy of that, or it's in this packet, I guess, too, for the meeting. But that's always, it seems like a lot of our applicants, that's like one of the most fun things that they receive early in the process.
It was actually, and I'm originally from Iowa, and I was familiar with some of the names from some of the towns in southern Iowa. So I have my mom cross-referencing if I'm possibly related to people who lived here before.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting. Huh. Yeah, they very well could have at least known someone that is related to you. So that's really exciting. And we love the personal part of historic preservation. That's what kind of makes it all worthwhile. So that's great.
And
does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
My name is Phil Van Zyl. I'm also at
Oh.
633 McKinley Avenue. Just wanted to add that we've been here for about 10 years and enjoy living here very much. And in regards to the historic document that was provided, it'll be fun just to be able to talk with our neighbors now across the street, Donna. She's a wealth of knowledge, and it's just been fun to talk to her, and she'll go through names of people that have lived here and who she went to school with. So it's already been a fun process.
That's great.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicants? All right, and I'll see if there's any public comments. If anyone would like to speak. I don't see anyone. So we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion.
This seems like an ideal candidate to launch that process of maybe eventually landmarking the structure. So it looks appropriate to me.
I would agree.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I agree too.
I also agree. And, you know, these bungalow style homes, there's a fair number of these in Louisville, which to me speaks actually to preserving as many of them as we can, because it really does highlight this was a pretty solid era of development for Louisville. And, you know, the kind of scattered throughout the different neighborhoods, and they really kind of have a real feel to Louisville. So I like to see these preserved. So I think it meets all the criteria.
I agree.
So it definitely meets our 50 years or older. It has great architectural integrity and also excellent social history. So it meets at least those three criteria that we have. So yeah, so definitely this would meet our probable cause criteria. So if someone would like to make a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion to approve the probable cause determination for 633 McKinley Avenue.
I'll second.
And we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Clemmy,
Yes.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. The staff will be in touch with you as far as the HSA and just kind of the next steps as well. The HSA is really exciting too, because some people find really fun things as they start to explore their house that much more in great detail. So
Thank you very much.
yeah, you're probably welcome. Hopefully we'll see you again.
Thanks.
And don't change the siding.
Noted.
All right. So we have one more probable cause determination this evening, and that is for 301 Spruce Street. And we'll have a presentation from staff.
Sorry, I jumped in. I was too excited.
Oh,
No,
you're good.
thank you. I'm ready to go. All right, let me just share my screen one more time here so we can talk about our last probable cause of the evening, which is 301 Spruce Street. This is a request to find probable cause for a landmarking designation to allow funding of a historic structure assessment for 301 Spruce Street. Oops. So on the next, on this slide before you can see it's on the left-hand side of the screen is that general map full town, and then the yellow star would indicate its approximate location therein. And then on the right-hand side is the map indicating its location. So you can see it's at the corner of McKinley and Spruce, and then it's outlined in the yellow dashed line. For some historic photos, these are both from 1985. They were a part of a state inventory form done at the time. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you can see sort of that south elevation or the southwest elevation. And on the right-hand side, this is the rear we'd be looking at on that right-hand picture. And so that would be the north or the kind of northwest elevation from 1985. Here would be a couple current day photos. These would be from 2021. Again, the photo on the left would be the front facade, so that south elevation, and then on the right, we'd be looking at the the kind of southwest elevation there on the corner. As always, for the landmarking criteria, we'd look at these kind of three main things outlined before you here: how old it is, does it meet one or more of the criteria for architecture, social, or geographic significance, and then does it meet the criteria for physical integrity. And so to dive into those, the 301 Spruce Street was constructed about 1908, so making it approximately 113 years old, so it certainly meets the 50-year threshold. For the architectural significance, it's an excellent example of vernacular stylings at the turn of the century. So sometimes we see it listed as, you know, sort of a kind of folk Victorian, sometimes, but it certainly has other styling. So needless to say, it doesn't fit into one neat box, but it certainly exemplifies many important character defining features of that time period. For social significance, I think the main factor to look at in this case would be that it already does sit on the National Register of Historic Places. Colorado is different from many states, but in our state, if it's on the National Register of Historic Places, it's automatically placed on the State Register of Historic Places, assuming that if it's got national importance, it probably has state importance as well. And so it also has direct ties, to Charles Wolfer, so a prominent figure in both civic and business circles, so certainly very strong local ties as well. The house is located in the Louisville Heights addition, which was first platted in 1904, and does appear to retain all 7 aspects of integrity. And so we certainly feel, staff does find that it would meet the physical integrity criteria. And then for another example, it does remain in the same spot in which it was constructed, so it's in its original location. So what you'd be looking at tonight, a finding of probable cause would meet the following goals and objectives there. You see goal number 3 and goal number 5 outlined there before you. And so with that, staff does recommend that you, HPC finds their probable cause for landmarking for 301 Spruce Street under the criteria of the Louisville Municipal Code. The current maximum available for an HSA is $4,000 for a residential structure. And so staff recommends that the HPC approve the grant not to exceed $4,000 to reimburse the costs of historic structure assessment. And you may by motion approve or deny the finding of probable cause. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions on the presentation after I find my mouse in one of my 8 screens. There we go.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for staff? All right, and then
Looks like Gary's muted. Sorry, Chair.
oh,
Okay, yeah, I think I probably asked this before on a prior structure, but if a structure is already landmarked at a national level, I think by landmarking at a local level, we add some level of protection against unauthorized modifications. Is that correct, that a nationally historical building can be modified or demolished?
That's exactly right. I know it seems backwards,
Okay.
but actually the more local you get, the better sort of restrictions
Okay.
or kind of safety measures you would have on a property. So that's
Yeah.
right. National register wouldn't have the same sort of teeth, we often say, as putting it on a local register would have.
Okay.
So you have that exactly correct.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, does seem backwards.
all right, any other questions for staff? And then is the applicant here this evening?
We do. We have Andy Johnson as the applicant for the project.
All right, you just want to state your name and address.
Sure. This is Andy Johnson with DAJ Design at 922A Main Street. Good to see you again. I don't really have much to say on this project. I don't think that there's going to be a lot of argument. It's amazingly well preserved, even in its current state. You know, I think aside from the additional protection on the property, this is a good opportunity to get an inventory of what kind of shape is it in, structurally, physically, you know, from the outside, it looks great. Probably needs a little bit of love, but overall, I have been in this house. I think that overall it's pretty outstanding. We're lucky to have this one still standing and pretty much unaltered. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I think there's some obvious decisions to be made, not to guide your hand in any way.
All right, any questions for the applicant? All right, we'll bring it back for discussion with the commission. Let me check and see if there's any public comment actually. And I don't see any. So we'll bring it back for discussion. So it'll be a lot of deliberating. It'll be a tough decision.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty easy decision, and I'm really interested to see what the HSA comes up with. You know, as Andy mentioned, it looks, it's a grand old house, but those old houses usually need a lot of, some upkeep. So it'd be great to hear what it needs to keep it keep it in the condition we want to keep it in.
Yeah, I think it's great too because we don't have a lot of large historic homes in Louisville in general, and then we also have even less that are actually landmarked. So I think this is a really just very prominent house, and there's a lot of great houses along Spruce and just in that general area. So maybe just kind of stirring up what could be and just showing setting a good example for the neighbors and everything will be good proximity as well. So yeah, so it definitely meets our architectural integrity, 50 years or older, and has great social history. So, and it's a national landmark as well as state, so, or historic, I'm sorry, National Historic Register, is that what it is? So those are the technical criteria, just to throw those out there.
Yes,
If
I
you-
agree. It meets those.
Mhm.
If you had a short list of houses that were appreciated in Old Louisville, this one is always on it. It's a favorite of the public in all of the surveys we have and things.
Absolutely.
I would move that we approve the request for a historic structural assessment.
And the probable cause determination,
Yes.
you want to add that to it?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, that's good. It's a mouthful.
I would second that motion.
And we'll do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Dunlap,
Yes.
Commissioner Keller,
Yes.
Commissioner Berg,
Yes.
Commissioner Clemmy,
Yes.
Chair Haley.
Yes. So this will be an exciting one to get the HSA and then just see what comes. So thank you, Andy, for working on this project and
You're welcome.
representing it.
You're welcome. Thank you. I would like to encourage you guys to receive 2 documents that maybe Kim can send you. One is the nomination form that included a couple dozen other structures around Louisville that you may not be aware were nominated for the National Register. And then the actual approval of which structures were approved along with the Robinson House. That's the Robinson House. That you also might not be aware of because every single one of them surprised me. Except for the State Mercantile Building. So it's pretty illuminating. And the write-ups are fabulous. Really, really well done. And it's fun to see how things were done in terms of nominations and the write-ups, and they are extremely thorough.
Wow.
Anyway, if you're so interested, I encourage you to receive those documents and look at them.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting.
Actually, I think they were part of the packet that Kim sent out with us, or maybe I only read it for this one building, but I think the lists were there in today's packet, or this packet. Is that right, Kim?
That is correct. Yep. The National Register form, it's a multiple inventory form, was part of the packet. Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
But I
Okay.
can also, I'm more than happy to send it separately, just so it's not kind of, buried within the larger document. So I can follow up this evening with that as well.
Thank you.
Oh, I think I see it. Yep. Yeah, that's really interesting. Huh.
I think if I may just jump in too, what's cool about it is you can see them also talk about some other properties in town and then sort of how they made their decision to pick the ones that were in this. So that's kind of neat too. It just gives us further context, which is kind of interesting.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's what Andy was saying too, is that this one was kind of surprising. So probably fun to look through. Yeah, thanks for that. All right. So our next item is items from staff.
Thank you, Chair. I always seem to lose my mouse every time it's my turn, like I don't know it's coming or something. So tonight I just have a few items, few subcommittee updates, and then our next meeting updates. I know that we've been talking about getting back with the sort of list or table of kind of where projects are. And so I apologize I don't have that tonight, but I will have it for December's meeting, which I think will be particularly important so we can kind of see as we wrap up the year kind of where we're at and what we're getting ready to do for somehow it's already almost 2022. So I just did want to make a note on that, but I'm going to share my screen to talk about some of the subcommittee reviews that we had between the last meeting and then tonight. I did not include any HSA sort of presentations tonight, just since we had a couple items on the agenda. I didn't know how long or how short they might take. So we'll get that too as in kind of future meetings. It seems like we like to kind of look back on those and just study them and look at them. So I didn't want you to think I forgot about that either. But what we have here tonight is a couple subcommittee updates. So the first one would be an alteration certificate update. Between this meeting and the last meeting, we just had one review that we actually just were able to finish today, so I was able to put it in the presentation. So the museum campus, so the Tomeo and Jordanelli houses actually came forward with an alteration subcommittee request. So especially in light of our sort of conversation before, they're landmarked. So they do go to the alteration subcommittee first, and then they would have the opportunity to move it up. But in this case, they did release it. And so that's why I'm talking about it here before you tonight. So they reviewed a request for some porch replacements at, again, the Tomeo and Jordanelli houses. So you can see the Jordanelli house in the architectural drawing on the top on the right-hand side of your screen, and the Tomeo house on the bottom half of the right-hand side of your screen there. And so the subcommittee released the request, and the rationale was as follows. The proposed materials are similar and sensitive to original materials of the time period. The porches would be constructed of wood with some steel kind of additional elements, but primarily wood. And then the proposed replacement would help provide better access to the buildings and meet code while retaining a period appropriate aesthetic. Some of the current railings, for instance, don't meet some of the code standards. They're not wide enough for folks to kind of get on and walk up. So they would be changing those. And then the proposed request would not have a negative impact on the historic integrity of the properties. So this was released at subcommittee. So that's the alteration update for the month. And then I do have two demolition subcommittee updates. So as I mentioned in the 633 McKinley report, or staff presentation, I should say, we did see a subcommittee review for the removal of the non-historic greenhouse that's on the south side of the property. You can see on the right-hand side of your screen, what these are drawn plans from the time in which it was submitted, which was the 1980s, so it was not historic. And then you could see kind of what it looked like on the property. And so the subcommittee did review and then released the request, and the rationale was that the greenhouse was not historic, and the demolition of this part of the structure would not have a negative impact on the historic integrity. In fact, right, bringing that section of the house back a little bit. So that was one of the ones. And then the last demolition subcommittee update I have for you would be 928 Lafarge. This one probably looks familiar. We earlier this year saw probable cause for this property, so it's working through the HSA process, which is, again, probably why it looks familiar. We had a demolition request to replace the existing siding on the historic portion of the property. So that front portion there, and then as if you remember, there's kind of the addition in the rear. And so the subcommittee did release, and the request and the rationale was that the current siding was not original or historic, and the proposed replacement siding would better match both the photography from the photo you see on the right, which is from the Boulder County Assessor's card, and then is part of the recommendation from the HSA. So kind of a direct pull from the HSA. It will be horizontal. So as we look at that, so that was the rationale for releasing there. And then the last item I would have is just an update on the upcoming schedule. So December 20th is our next meeting. We continue to meet virtually. As I mentioned, I'll update you as I know, but at this time, no notice information to me that it would be otherwise other than virtual. And it would be at our normal time. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions, but those are my staff updates.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess this comes, our next item is updates from commission members. And I don't know if we need to talk about the citing thing as far as like future subcommittees or something. So I don't know. I don't feel like this has come up before, but I just want to make sure that we don't get, and it was just kind of a, yeah, just an unusual situation in general. But I don't know if, and this probably Gary's like, I told you guys, I told you. So right, as far as design.
Well, no, I've given a lot of thought since the meeting we had with the Planning Commission members and the report by the consultants. And design is difficult to include in any zoning codes, but it is certainly part of historical preservation. All of the things we do talk about the character and the integrity and the design. So, but it's not as crystal clear, that's for sure, as 20 feet for a setback or 27 feet for a height. So I would like to, maybe we should have a discussion separately sometime to talk about if there had been a better way to handle this kind of sequence of events, because we don't really put out recommendations or guidelines for changes. And this wasn't a landmarked structure at the time. So if it could have been handled better or differently, yeah, I'd like us to have that discussion. Maybe not now, but.
Yeah, well, and I was looking at I think it was Lafarge, through the items from staff that we just looked at.
Yeah.
And they were like, it was a good example of, and did that one have an HSA on it? I can't remember. That had probable cause?
Yeah.
That's
okay.
correct.
So I mean, that's an exact, could potentially be an exact duplicate, right? But the reason it was released was because they found citing that was similar enough to the photos that they had. So I think that's what was just tricky, is that the citing that was approved, because even if it wasn't landmarked, generally, like, we still try to keep it similar to one of the, because we had a social history on that house too, because we had probable cause. So we had all the pictures. We also just have the assessor picture and all that. And so using that as our reference of, even if it's not landmarked, if it meets the criteria of 50 years and older and it comes to us, we see the picture and we say, oh, the siding looks similar to this. If you're going to replace it, it needs to look similar to this. So yeah, so I think
well, if there
this Lafarge house could have done the same thing of like, oh, we like Shaker better, let's do that instead. And I think they would have said that doesn't match what was originally in the photos. So that's just that tricky part of just because it's not landmarked doesn't mean that we don't hold the photos as our historic record of something that should be modeled after as closely as possible. Obviously, it's not going to be perfect because we don't have those same materials, but you know, as similar as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen some come through too that were a little like, like I remember early on I had like a roof replacement and the shingles, you know, and the best we could say is, hey, these shingles look like what would have been on in 1920, you know, like we had nothing to go by, right? Like it was like, well, yeah, that could have been what was on that structure?
Mhm.
You know, nobody knows because it's shingles and they were long gone, you know? So it can get kind of tricky when you're
Right.
like, you know, what era are they going to take it back to? Do we have pictures of that era? You know, it can get a little, yeah, it can get a little odd. And again, I think we just need to make sure that, yeah, the lens we look at it from would be like, our goal is to landmark every single house. So not that that'll ever happen, but like if we can kind of look through that lens, like, but if you wanted to landmark this and the next person wanted to do, what would it look like? You know,
Yeah.
not just historic, like, oh, it's historic to that period, so that works. But yeah, no, that was a tricky one. And the remodel thing kind of threw a, you know, that kind of threw a little weird thing in it too, because like, what one are you taking it back to? And yeah, anyway, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, you know, I think we all agreed, you know, and did the right thing landmarking this one, and the process was out of order. But I wouldn't want to see it continue to happen. Like I wouldn't want, you know, not like word to get out, but for someone to be like, well, we could do this. We could, you know, this process shouldn't be repeated with people then kind of working the system for that. Like,
And I think the biggest lesson learned is we don't want the awkward piece that happened tonight. We just want to make sure that that we catch things in subcommittee, that we have an agreement as far as you know, using photos, historic photos for references if we do agree. And maybe too, just saying like, if you have any, like maybe we need to say like citing can actually be kind of a big deal. So if you don't feel comfortable approving in subcommittee a citing, don't feel like it's too small of a project. Like just say, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Like, because we were more than happy to talk about it to avoid awkward conversations later. So, so it's always okay to bring it to full commission, even if you feel like it's a small, whatever. So a small decision, or, you know, don't ever hesitate to bring it to the full commission. So yeah, so I don't think we don't need to like beat ourselves up or feel bad about anything that happened tonight by any means. Like everything that was approved tonight is great and awesome and we're good, you know, like so, but there's just always, we just want to make sure that our program is as fine-tuned as possible and we just figure out how to make it better, and that's what we're doing. So it was a good learning experience and we got a great house. So yeah.
To be specific though, on if we were using as a comparison that Lafarge subcommittee request, they did ask for the same siding. It sounds like the same wood siding as a replacement. So that made it easy. But if they'd asked for a beveled hardy board, you know, horizontal siding that would look a lot the same, it would be a different material. And if you looked up close, it wouldn't look the same. Would you prove that? I don't know. We don't really have written guidelines for anything like that. For what's going forward for even after it had been landmarked, if somebody said this siding is rotted away and I want to replace it with hardy board, would we?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would be definitely like material even more than design. I mean, goes with design automatically comes with it just because it's it looks different than actual wood, but it's also material. So yeah, I think we definitely just have some discussions. We might add that to our ongoing list of discussion items that we need to do.
I think it goes back to the larger, question about design guidelines and.
Yeah, and I think when we met with the consultants last month, the question of, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, the question of design criteria came up in the wider context of new builds, you know, and that's where, you know, I sort of said that's in new builds, people are going to want to build things that are attuned to their styles. But with HSA or with, historic preservation, like this is our job, is to make sure that things look historic. So we can have guidelines, I feel like, new builds, not so much perhaps, but, for us, we should have those guidelines. So, I think Andy, in Andy's opinion, that house would have been aluminum siding to keep it historic. And I don't 100% disagree. Like that's, true historic would have been that 50s house. The person living there right now, I totally believe is getting great feedback. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. But it's a blend, and I think we did the right thing for the reasons we did it. But right. So I think we should have some guidelines, that is our job.
Yeah. All right. Any other items from anyone, from commission members?
I appreciate that Kim mentioned that she would do the table of projects and things, because we are going to need to start considering those pretty soon in the new year. That'll be good.
All right. Anything else? All right. Our last item is to adjourn. So if anyone would like to make a motion.
I move to adjourn our meeting.
Okay.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Good night.
night.
Bye.
Bye.
For everyone, have a good night.
Thanks.